Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everybody. Today's episode is sponsored by AbleDocs, makers of Access PDF for Word, Access PDF Quick Fix, and document remediation services.
All right, guys, welcome to episode 2, right? So here we are again, Chad, another week, another set of topics, another great set of information to talk about. So how'd you think last week went? I thought it went pretty well.
Yeah, I do too. I think everybody enjoyed it. We're getting a lot of good feedback on it. And, I really enjoy doing this, and I hope everybody enjoys it as well. I'm looking forward to many more to come.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask, I put up a poll on our Facebook group, PDF Accessibility. For those of you who don't know, we have a Facebook group called PDF Accessibility with about 1,000 members. And I put up a poll that asked how they were testing for accessibility, kind of, are they using a screen reader? Are they not? And I was surprised at how many people were only using Apple VoiceOver as a way to test their documents.
Yeah. Well, we're in a challenging industry with PDF remediation. One of the reasons is because most of the software available, most of the third-party software available is Windows-based.
Right.
And you and I know, myself personally, you are a Windows user, right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to hold that against you at all. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm a Mac user, right? But because I do PDF remediation, I need to run parallels on my Mac,
right?
Running Windows so that I can, so I can run Pack 3, so I can use third-party utilities, so that I can use NVDA.
Pack 3, though, I heard you announce something at the last accessibility summit about Pack 3. Why don't you tell us what that is?
I am waiting with bated breath. Your friend and mine, we have a mutual acquaintance who is basically responsible for releasing Pack 3 on the Mac side. So he did give me permission to announce that, and I tell you what, I cannot wait, because I'm literally running Windows only to run Pack 3 half the time. And it is just so annoying, but yeah, I mean, it's exciting news, and I can't wait for the day that we can announce it and send everybody over there to download a copy on their own.
Well, one of the questions I asked was, how do you make documents compliant? And the questions, the overwhelming response, I put about 4 different responses in there. I remediate by hand using Acrobat Checker. I use Common Look. I remediate by hand using Pack 3. And I use the Accessibility Assistant for Word and PowerPoint. Actually, that was added by one of our members. And I use InDesign, Acrobat Checker, and Pack 3 was also added by another one of our members. 47 of the, there are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. There's right about 100 people that answered the question. And so 47% of them said, I remediate by hand and use only the Acrobat Checker. Yeah. And I, it's so interesting to me because, while you would think logic would say that Acrobat wants to be compliant and Acrobat would make a checker that would validate compliance, the truth you and I both know is that any accessibility is a series of manual and automated checks, and that Acrobat can technically pass even some automated things that are not technically passable, that don't meet WCAG. And so it's not even just you can use an automated checker. You have to know when the automated checker is wrong. When it looks at that item and says, oh yeah, your heading structure is fine, even though there's nothing there, or that your heading should be an H3 and it's an H4, or, whatever the case may be, or your table has missing cells or merged cells and but no scope, right? So things like that, you really have to have a base knowledge. 16% said they use Common Look. I personally use Common Look, not because I want a shortcut, because I don't know, but I have been doing this so long, I'm so tired of manually doing it one at a time. There's some great time-saving tools in Common Look, but with great power comes great responsibility, because there's also really easy ways. You press the wrong button and all of a sudden you have completely jacked up your tags tree because you double nested a set of tags, and it does a document wide. So you have to be careful. And then 14% said I remediate by hand using Pack 3, which is great, and that's fine. I use Pack 3. I mean, my workflow is I and you tell me what yours is, but I walk the tag tree and fix all the stuff I know is wrong first. Then I run the Acrobat checker and fix any of those issues. Then I run Pack 3, fix all of those issues. And then actually I go back and I run Acrobat checker again. And I'll tell you why I do that, because most clients will open Acrobat checker and just run that. And if for some reason Pack 3 is I had to make some change to suffice Pack 3, but it throws an error inside the Acrobat checker, I don't have time to explain it to the client why I'm right and Acrobat's wrong. I just go in and double check and make sure I fixed it and good. So what's your workflow?
No, I've had that exact same experience where I got it to completely pass Pack 3 and just happened to run the Acrobat checker again and had a couple of errors. Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute, like how can that be? But I mean, my workflow is very similar to yours. I guess what I would add to you is whenever possible, I'll go in and modify the source document if I'm provided with. Oh,
absolutely. Totally.
It's a little bit of a sticky wicket though, because when I go into the source document to add the hooks, if you will,
right?
Whether it's Word, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's InDesign, there is a danger that I'm going to mess something up,
right?
That I'm going to cause reflow, that I'm going to do something. Yep. This is especially true in InDesign, right? Because in InDesign, I'm imparting consistency to the document by adding styles.
Right.
And if the designer did not use styles, maybe one time the heading was 12 point and another time it was 14 point, and now all of a sudden I got reflow. So whenever I do that, I will output a PDF, send it to the client for visual approval before I continue remediation, because if there's an issue, I want to address it right away before I spend, we talked about that.
Yeah.
You're 20% on 15%.
Right.
But roughly the same. So I'll then output the PDF, run the Acrobat checker. The Acrobat checker just kind of lets me know of the dumb things I forgot. You know what I mean? They go, oh, you forgot the title. Of course you did. You know what I mean? Like things like that.
Well, but that's funny. You bring up the title, right?
Headers. Yeah.
Right. So the title, so many times you run the Acrobat checker, it gives you the error that there's no title. And all you're like, no, there is a title. Just right click and hit fix and it'll go find it. I'm like, why doesn't Acrobat actually recognize the dang title is there? You took the time to set it. Why?
I know.
I know.
It goes back to our laundry list, right?
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you, the other thing I forgot to add is that I always check with NVDA and JAWS. So, what I do is I start walking through header to header to header, or I'll look through my bookmarks and kind of make sure my structure looks right. And then I'll go pick a couple of tables or maybe an infographic that I've done some special treatment to and test those and ensure that the way it's being read is the way I want it to be read. Math equations are terrible. Most linear math equations do not get voiced correctly. So you end up having to make them an image and apply alt text, all different situations. But, that testing with a screen reader is so important, because again, no one's going to sue you because you didn't pass 1.3.1 info and relationships. They're going to sue you because they couldn't get to the information in a paragraph that you just blanketly put some generic alt text on that wasn't meaningful to what was going on, or because they were looking for the heading that's in the document that wasn't there. And it's, 10,000 pages or, 500 pages of paragraph tags with no structure. That's what they're going to sue you for. Right.
Yep.
So
awesome. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, as part of the remediation process, you and I talked about this, I think, yesterday where, every PDF I create, I have to walk the tags tree. I pretty much have to touch every tag in the document. It's just part of the process, because that's how you verify. That's how you find issues, and things like that. Right. So, yeah, that's just part of my process. And then one of my processes is, and I mentioned this in the previous episode, I will run it through PDF Go HTML.
Right.
Render it as a web page, but I then click on the structure button.
Right.
That way I could see the order, I could see how things are tagged, and it's just kind of a quick way for me to go through the document and just kind of verify that the things look the way they should.
Right. And then I actually, in Callus, I have set it so that it automatically goes to the structure view, so that I don't have to click on the little tabs, because I think there's like 8 or so tabs. I actually didn't even know they were there until I was looking at it earlier. I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot more here than just structure. Disabling CSS and other stuff. So contrast mode is another good one that's inside Callus, that it changes the background color to a darker or lighter. Adds contrast, which I thought was a great little tool. So, and
there's a dyslexia mode as well.
Yeah.
That you can turn on.
I'm not happy. So having dyslexia myself, I find most people don't understand what really happens. And it's such a hard thing to combat, right? So having a P and a a Q that look exactly the same. The only difference is one has a little tilt and one has a little stick and one might not, right? But having it be different, as long as they're not exactly the same, I can pick out the small nuances. I'm looking for those differences. My brain automatically will recognize they're different. But and of course, my disability, my version of what dyslexia is for me is different than somebody else's. But I don't need fat-bottomed font. I just need them to be different. I need them to be, a B and a D to be different. I need my I's and L's to be different. I need that. And for me, the other part is my numbers. It's funny. I will give you a little information. So when I look at a number, I'll see it visually. It's 50. I'll say 50, but I might type 05 because my brain flips it around for my fingers. So it's, everybody's different. I guess the bottom line to that is dyslexia mode, while I give some credit to what they're trying to do, it's such a hard thing to really to combat. And
sure,
I know that there's not just one answer. So it is a hard thing.
Well, and I think what you just described, I think what you just described is really valuable information. I just learned something because I really don't fully understand what a dyslexic person experiences, what their challenges are, what they face, and that is all fantastic information. It's good information for us to know,
it's just being aware. I think awareness, my mantra for accessibility is awareness, knowledge, and awareness, education, and implementation, right? First, you become aware that it's a thing. Then you become educated on what it is and how I can fix it. And then the last part is implementation, actually doing something about it. And I think a lot of corporations are stuck in that awareness. They aren't even aware. They have, this is a thing, right? We have disability and we have diversity and inclusion is everywhere on the web right now. Everybody's talking about how diverse and how inclusive they are. But what they don't, often you try to talk to them and you say, oh, great. So what is your accessibility policy? Oh, well, we make sure that all our doors and, that we have accessible desks okay, but that's only part of it, right? They don't understand digital accessibility as part of that inclusive experience, because it's not just about access to information. It's about feeling included in the culture, right?
Yeah.
If your corporation is doing training and you can't, and as a person who might have a reading disability, I can't read what's on there, and I use maybe Windows Navigator or Apple VoiceOver or NVDA to read the content, and I can't get to it. Now I'm being excluded. I'm feeling ostracized from the company. So I think it is important.
Well, one of the best experiences that I had, Dax, a few years ago, I taught PDF accessibility to a company in Seattle called Lighthouse for the Blind.
Oh yeah. I know that.
And, when you walk into their facility, I mean, everything is built. So the first thing that kind of blew my mind, when you, and this is me being very naive, right? So I'm thinking, okay, they only employ blind people. And I'm like, okay, like what are they making? And I had a kind of connotation in my head, like, okay, this is what they're doing. They're making aerospace parts.
Wow.
Their people are running CNC machines, milling metal for airplanes.
Wow.
So their CNC machines are running jaws.
What?
And they are plugging the values in for the part that they're making, loading the CNC machine, closing the door, and running the machine.
Wow.
But what I was there for, I was teaching their blind people how to make PDFs accessible.
Wow, that's so cool.
So like when I teach classes and people say, "Oh, this is hard," wait a second, and what was really eye-opening was I couldn't really teach them to do much in Acrobat,
right? And that's
because Acrobat's not accessible,
right?
I couldn't teach them how to make a PDF out of InDesign because InDesign is not accessible,
right?
But Word is.
Yep.
Word has what are called, are they quick access keys?
Yes, they do.
Do I have that terminology?
Yep.
So if you hold down your Alt key, you could press the letter F, which will open a menu, and then another letter that will access the command in that menu.
Right. So if you've ever accidentally pressed that or held down Alt, you'll see that the letter comes up as inside a little square. And and those are all those shortcut keys.
So they taught me how to kind of explain to them. And so I would say, okay, access key F, W, or and don't quote me on that. I don't know what that does, but it was something like that. And then they were able to access the command that I was telling them to go to. And
awesome.
It was a great experience. But it was very eye-opening too, to simply, what it's like for a non-sighted user to use a computer.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was a question the other day on the message board about heading levels, right? On our Facebook group. And one person said, hey, my document skips heading levels, but it's somebody else's source document. I really can't edit it. What do I do? Right. And so there was a discussion back and forth about whether or not you can skip heading levels. And so the first thing I asked was, well, to what standard are you remediating to? Right? Because the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG 2.0 or 2.1, says that although a well-structured document has semantic heading levels, heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's okay, and it's not a failure that it skips a heading level. But PDF UA, clearly, I had to look it up. It was 4.2.2 in the if you don't have a copy of this document, I will tell anybody listening right now, this is the 14289-1. It is the tagged best practices, PDF best practices guide, ISO 14289-1. If you don't have this, you need a copy of it. I mean, you really should be looking at this. It's going to give you a lot of the technical answers that you're probably struggling to try to figure out. Now, it is a hard read. There's a lot of technical stuff going on. So it took me a while to get to a point where I could actually, it made a lot of sense. But in 4.2.2, it says, PDF UA-1 requires heading levels not to be skipped. Example, H1, H2, H4. However, otherwise well-structured documents exist in which heading levels are skipped, and their modification of content is not an option, which is exactly what this person's case was, right? It's a well-formed document, but it just skips a level. So PDF UA continues to say, in such cases, although a PDF UA flag cannot be used, it is recommended that the file conform with PDF UA in all other respects. In other words, you're not going to get a pass. We're not going to tell you it's a passing document. Just realize that you should still try to pass all the other requirements. Just realize you're not going to get past this one. And I thought that was interesting. right? That they acknowledge it's a thing, but that we're not going to let you get away with it, right? It's going to be required. Now, I will say that in PDF UA 2, which is still under development, they are removing this mandatory feature. I did see, I don't know if Common Look had posted something about it, or I saw some other website that had said, hey, look, just realize PDF UA 2 says this is not going to be a requirement anymore, but
I remember seeing that as well. I can't remember either where I saw that, but it's interesting, and it's also an example of how our standards evolve, right? Right. I mean, a great example, right? I mean, when I first started doing this, every table had to have a table summary.
Right. Right.
Well, over time, it was finally determined like, hey, listen, this is really not necessary. And so that was no longer required by normal people who are sane, who have a brain. We won't mention any HHS requirements that still require table summaries, or the fact that JAWS, the most popular screen reader on the market, ignores table summaries in a PDF. It does not read them. Only NVDA reads table summaries in a PDF. Now, in HTML, JAWS and NVDA will both read a table summary, but in a PDF, only NVDA will read it. So interesting. Yeah, it is very interesting. It is interesting. So, who's on Twitter? It's time for our little segment. We started this little segment. Who's on Twitter? We started this last episode. We're going to keep going on with it. Our next who's on Twitter is Adrian Roscelli, and that's ADR. His @ is AARDRIAN. And he wrote, I got tons of interesting feedback from why folks do not use JAWS for testing it as much as I might expect. And I wrote back and said, I completely agree. While it's most interesting that only 13% of native assistive technology users use Apple VoiceOver, and that almost none of the people who are testing with multiple screen readers, they're not aware of the differences of how the same text might be voiced differently, right? Basically, the idea is that, if you're just using Apple VoiceOver, or you're just using NVDA, you're not accounting for the differences in the different ways that screen readers are interpreting text, right? Anyway, his comment was that 37% use NVDA and 35% use Apple VoiceOver. And of course, the reality is that only 13% of actual native screen reader users are using Apple VoiceOver. That the majority of people are testing. And I think that goes back to why they test it, because that's what they have. Yeah. Right? Yeah. If they're on a Mac doing remediation, then they've got VoiceOver. So, well, and you had told me, Dax, that Apple VoiceOver is great for certain things, but does not read a PDF very well. Is that true?
So it is true, right? So Apple VoiceOver is integrated into every Mac device you have, in your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac computer, your Mac workbook, everything. And it does a great job of interface control and websites and social media and all of that. But it really has not, this kind of goes back to the old days of Flash and Adobe and Apple. That for some reason, there's this kind of adversarial relationship that just they don't play nice together.
Well, and I think we need to remember, sorry, not to interrupt you,
but
go ahead. I think we need to remember that Adobe no longer owns the PDF specification. Adobe made the PDF specification open source, many years ago.
Right.
But everybody still, relates PDF to Adobe, right? They're like, I wish Adobe would fix this, and it's not really Adobe anymore. I mean, it's a diverse group of people who are kind of contributing to the format overall, including, Leonard Rosenthal, who's been involved in PDF forever.
Well, they've got a new thing, the PDF Reflow, right? And that's supposed to be a new thing coming out. I'm actually excited about that PDF Reflow. I think it's going to help people. So PDF Reflow, for those who don't know, The idea is that you're going to take all of the containers that you normally see in your tags tree, and it's going to use those as objects to reflow your content. Think of like a dynamic HTML page that resizes into a mobile format. It's going to do that with using an AI methodology, right? So I think there will be some controls built in. So as a publisher, I can control some of that flow. But the idea is that they want to try to give an alternate way to present information in a mobile format that doesn't require all this extra remediation, which doesn't mean that we're going to be out of a job. It just means that on a mobile device, I'll be able to have a flow that fits into my screen. So one of the things we need to remember is that for people who have visual disability, the PDF on their phone is no different than the PDF on their computer. And while you and I may never, ever look at a 100-page document on our phone as a PDF, a person with a visual disability, there's no difference for them. There's that experience is very close to the same. Now, of course, you have keyboard commands that are much easily accessible, if you're, using it at your computer versus a phone. But the user experience is very similar. But PDF Reflow is going to make the visual experience much easier to digest, which I think helps people with cognitive disability and people who have some vision, but might just have a limited vision and need larger text. So I'm excited to see how it comes out. I really am.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, listen, here's the harsh reality. I mean, as a sighted user, viewing a PDF on my phone sucks.
Yeah.
Like, end of story, period. It's a horrible experience. The reflow mode is like a read mode in your web browser. I love it. The challenge we're facing right now, and I think it's just because this is their first iteration of the feature. Right. Currently, the reflow mode ignores any tags in your document.
Right.
Adobe is using, I believe, using artificial intelligence to
Sensei technology.
Adobe Sensei, is using some type of AI to kind of, and I'm assuming it's going by font size or something like that to kind of establish the headings. Hopefully, they're using better technology than auto tag in Acrobat because auto tag.
Another episode, yet another episode.
But yeah, I mean, I'm actually excited about Reflow. I've used it. I mean, when I use that, I'm usually like fixing my lawnmower in my backyard and I'm referencing the manual on my phone, let's be real. Most of those manuals are like scanned PDFs that have nothing, but every now and then I get one that reflow mode works. And I'm like, wow, I can scroll through. I can, it's really, really nice. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, another topic that came up the other day was somebody asked about AAA compliance. They're like, we need to make a document AAA compliant. And they're like, and then my first comment was, you realize that AAA, they wanted to know what the requirements, how to do that, how to go about that. And they started talking about color contrast. Well, AAA requirements are special. And in the WCAG standard, it actually says that you cannot meet all of the AAA requirements in conjunction with each other, that some are in conflict. And you really have to know which AAA requirements your client is requesting. So I thought that was an interesting thing that a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah.
Because we think, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, it's a really good point. And for beginning people getting into creating accessible PDF files, it's one of the most confusing aspects is the standards, right? You know what I mean? Like, and to explain to them that, hey, the Acrobat checker is really not checking to any standard, and they're like, well, I don't understand. That's what my company's using to establish that this document is accessible, and so it is. I mean, it's even to this day, it can be challenging to all of us, I think.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, AAA is just kind of a component of the WCAG requirement. Right. And
it has a lot to do with large text and color, like almost no color. And I mean, it's really for the most strict requirements about how hyperlinks can be represented, how links can be represented, what size text can be, all of that. And again, different parameters for different subjects can be in conflict with each other. So you have to understand, and it says right in the WCAG guideline that you understand that you cannot meet all of these requirements, that some are exclusive to each other. And I thought that was an interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
One of the other things that somebody brought up was the language. Language is in a PDF, right? And so, I think a lot of people don't understand that JAWS and NVDA are not universal translators. That JAWS will read about 18 or 40 different languages. Somewhere, maybe it's 18. It's not a lot, right? NVDA will read 72 languages, but you have to have those language packs installed. So as a tester, if I've got a document that's got 3 translations, and this happens a lot in state documents where you have to have a phrase in English, a phrase in Spanish, a phrase in Chinese, and a phrase in, you pick your language, Korean or Russian, depending upon what area you're in, right? And as remediators, we're like, I tested this NVDA and it's still not reading it the way the Chinese characters or the Russian characters should be read. And I'm like, yeah, of course.
It won't.
You don't have that language pack installed.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure you tag it correctly. And there is that way to go in, find the drop down in that paragraph property, and check the language. But what do you do when your language isn't in that list?
Yeah.
Do you know? Do you know?
I do not. I have no idea.
So there is an ISO standard, right? So if you look up the ISO standard, it is there it is, ISO 639-2. If you Google that, ISO 639-2, it is the list of language codes by the ISO standard, right? And what this is a 2 or 3 letter code that correlates to a specific language or dialect for just a ton of different languages. Now, can you choose which one you use? The 2 or 3? It doesn't matter. No, it does matter in certain cases. I tend to use the ones without the parentheses in them, just because I feel safer, like it's going to read it better. But the ISO 639-2 is the current version of the language code, and you can use those letters, and they will correspond if that person has that language pack installed. So if you've got somebody had Creole, right? French Creole from Haiti, and they wanted to tag a paragraph in Creole. And I said, okay, well, you have to use the French Creole language. And in fact, there is, if you scroll down to Creole, there you go. So Haitian Creole is HAT. So depending upon which, you have to be very careful about what language you pick, right? In this list to make sure you have the right dialect, the right dialogue. So Hawaiian, right? I mean, Hebrew, those are things that aren't in the drop-down list for Acrobat, but I can see how they could come up in certain documents.
Well, what can also be confusing about dealing with other language text is that if you open up the tag for that text, a lot of times all you see is rectangles.
Right.
And once again, to your point of needing to have the language installed, you would need to have a font installed that supports that language.
Exactly.
And the reason they're showing up as rectangles is because you don't have a Hebrew font or whatever it might be installed. So that definitely gets tricky.
No, I agree. Well, Chad, we're at the end, dude. It is another podcast. We have time just flies, man. It is. So
it really
great.
Does.
I really love talking with you. And, again, I'd like, for those of you who are listening, if you're not part of our Facebook group, PDF Accessibility, I've got a YouTube channel, PDF Accessibility as well. I don't post on there a lot, but I do post. There's some good stuff, some good walkthroughs. And then you and I were speaking in May. Right? May 17th through
Creative
the 21st.
Pro Conference.
Right? Creative Pro. And you're doing, what are your sessions?
Yeah, my sessions, I'm doing one on accessibility in Acrobat. So I think, you're doing a couple of sessions on InDesign,
Right.
and then I'm going to follow up with, what we need to do in Acrobat after that to kind of get everything compliant. I'm doing a session on outputting from InDesign to other formats. I'm doing a session on scripts, and I'm doing another one that I can't think of off the top of my head, but that's
okay. Well, and then I'm doing one in PowerPoint. I will tell you, for those of you who have to remediate in PowerPoint files, I'm going to give you, Chad knows a secret already. I'm going to give you a secret PowerPoint tip. I swear you do not know is inside PowerPoint that deals with accessibility. It's going to be great.
It's so you don't have to think backwards.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
That's a hint. That's a good hint. And then I'm going to have a great checklist on how to check for accessibility, that you've dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's in PowerPoint. So that's going to be great. And then I'm also speaking at SMPS Build Business 2021. For those of you in the architectural, engineering, construction world, I'm going to talk about how accessibility affects your deliverable from a timeline and budget perspective, and how also you can increase your win rate by including accessibility as a feature. Right. So, and then Chad, the other place is you're in LinkedIn, right? You've got some LinkedIn courses.
LinkedIn Learning, formerly lynda.com. A lot of old timers, not old timers. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But a lot of people who've been in the design business for a long time.
I'm going to tell David Blattner on you.
but a lot of people who've been in the design business for a long time are really familiar with lynda.com. A few years ago, lynda.com got purchased by LinkedIn. And they kind of transformed the lynda.com library into LinkedIn Learning. So we'll I have several courses on PDF accessibility as well as other topics in that library. So please check those out.
Awesome. And then I just want to thank IAAP for being the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, for being a pillar in the world of accessibility. If you're not a member of IAAP and you are in the accessibility world, you really should consider it. As we talked about in last episode, if you didn't catch our last episode, we talked about the Accessible Document Specialist certification. Go listen to that podcast. But really, it is a great litmus test to either prove what you already know and give yourself some validity, or to as a great learning tool to kind of get yourself a little farther along. So it has been my pleasure. I am Dax Castro, an Adobe certified PDF accessibility trainer. And this is Chad Chelius, who is also an accessible document specialist, an amazing presenter on LinkedIn. And we are so glad that you joined us on this journey. And please leave a comment below and let us know what you think of our podcast. We want to keep doing these. And if you've got ideas for us, just jot them down. I promise you we'll consider them. And we'll see you guys next time. And thanks for joining us as we help you along on your accessible journey.
Take care, guys.